I've spent the past centuries roaming the galaxy and collecting the finest of moments captured across time. I, Treason the Infinite, will make a library, no, a collection of the greatest beings and moments in time. But my favorite of all is this, the podcast Chaos Divided, and I have frozen their hosts in time, Nurgle Schnurgle and Blushing Noisemarine. For your pleasure, I will disengage the status fields. Now, hear their podcast and enjoy.
Welcome to Chaos Divided, your weekly dose of wholesome hammer. If you're a fan of what we do, we hope you'll subscribe and follow us along. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can find us on patreon.com/Chaos Divided 40K. This week, we're giving a state of the hobby, discussing some new news, some hot takes maybe, and we're also having a bit of a discussion on finding ways to stay excited about Warhammer.
Yes, which is something that we truly value and want to definitely put out there to some of our viewers with some good ideas.
Yes. So to get us started, we got a long one this week for a quote. So
let's hear it.
Without the dark, there can be no light. We have purpose. Without the lie, there can be no truth. We have purpose. Without the war, there can be no victory. We have purpose. Without the death, there can be no sacrifice. We have purpose. Without the hope, there can be no future. We have purpose. Without the loyalty, there can be no one chapter. We have purpose. Without the Emperor, there is nothing, and we would have no purpose. This is Ritual and Responses, Tome of Truths Foretold for Legions Astartes, from the Book of the Astronomicon.
Yeah. That was good. Yeah. I like that. It kind of states exactly what the universe is like there. It's like, well, if, there can't be truth without lies. There can't be this without that. There's always the light and the dark, but they're kind of in between in a massive gray area.
Well, and I think it also speaks a little bit to one of the main struggles the Astartes have is that, fight for purpose. Realistically, a lot of why the Horus Heresy happens is they feel their purpose fading. So,
yes.
It's the whole, you're an instrument, you're a tool, and you want to be used. And,
right. Which is why the doctrine relatively changes later on, where now their whole deal is, what is your duty? To serve the Emperor's will. What is the Emperor's will? That we must fight and die. What is death? It is our duty. And what is your duty? To serve the Emperor's will.
Which is a whole lot of circular logic right there.
Yep. That's what they do to them now, so I like them better in the 31st millennia than I do now in the 41st millennia.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot there, but to get us started, there's been a lot of exciting announcements.
There has been.
My favorite of which, Index Emperor's Children.
It's coming. It's gonna happen.
At the very least, it's not a codex. It's not going to be a release. They're pretty much saying it's not coming anytime soon, but that does mean it's coming at all.
That could be. It's still we still don't know what that redacted army that's coming out is going to be. It could very well be it could be the Emperor's Children, it could be the Eldar Exodites. Who knows?
That was supposed to come out in the summer. I think if we were getting a whole new line, I think we'd have heard about it by now. I don't think they're going to announce a Primarch with 2 to 3 months notice.
I still remember how they did it with Mortarion. All we got to see was a little glimpse of that scythe and a couple little things here and there, which you never know. It could happen. I don't put these days. I don't put anything past GW. They'll do whatever they need to sell that product. So if they want to do a drop line, hey, we're putting Emperor's Children down. Here's a crazy video. It's coming out. It's actually the codex that we're going to put out. Here's your index with the Chaos Space Marines. You could try it for a couple months and bam, here's your new army and codexes. I mean, it would make them a lot of money. It really would. If you think about it, like, you get the Chaos Marine players that are playing Emperor's Children to go out and buy indexes, and then you have them right off the bat a couple months later just go out and buy the codex. That's a double dip.
I feel like it's going to be the World Eater situation where, earlier on in 9, or when the, not earlier on in 9th, because that was a later codex, but when the Chaos Space Marine Codex came out in White Dwarf, you got the Index Hereticus for World Eaters, because they weren't in the codex anymore. I think this is the same thing. It's like, there is no Emperor's Children detachment in the CSM codex, so they needed to put them somewhere. Like, they pulled Lucius and Noise Marines out of the codex, so those data sheets aren't there, so they had to put them somewhere, which is the same thing. They had to put Karn and Berserkers somewhere.
Yeah, but then it does make you wonder, like, if they're going to be in an index, what abilities and things are they going to add to the index to make them more unique? Because that means they need to add stratagems, warlord traits, a couple of artifacts, as an index should have. You need to have at least with each of those things to make it an index. So at least there may be some flavorfulness to the army.
I'm really hope one of the wording in the paragraph says that they can use all the detachments from the CSM codex, which makes me worried they're not going to give them an Emperor's Children index, a detachment.
It's going to be the same thing as what happened with the World Eaters, because I'm 99% sure I mentioned this in our last show, but GW had already specifically said in the past that the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons were so drastically different from a lot of the other Chaos Legions that they got their entirely brand new line. Whereas the World Eaters and the Emperor's Children were not as drastically changed, so they kept them in the codex. So now when the World Eaters came out, you were still using the majority of the units from the Chaos Marine book with only a couple of brand new units. So I think we got, like, what was it? Technically 4 or 5, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's technically 5, but...
Yeah, 2 characters, 3 new units. And that was it.
You got 3 new boxes.
Exactly, and that's really all we got. It will be similar for the Emperor's Children, I believe, because they will go on that line like, well, no, they're still Chaos Space Marines, they're just a little bit different. So you'll get your Fulgrim, you'll get your Lucius, you may get one additional extra character that might be unique or cool to go into a specialized unit, and you'll probably get a box with like 2 boxes, one for cultists and one that has like a multi-purpose unit for now. And then they'll have that. They'll still run the same army with the same units, and later on they'll release more models as the codex comes, because I really do believe that they will treat them very closely to the Chaos Space Marines, but make them flavorful enough that there's only specific units that they will... the index will maybe kind of like not force you, but nudge the player into, hey, these units are going to work really well in the index because these are the units that we're going to port over to the codex for you. Yeah. Like you might not see obliterators that are really good for the Emperor's Children, but venom crawlers, bikes, raptors, warp talons, a lot of the fast stuff, I can see them being like, hey, we're going to emphasize these specific units because your army is going to be very tailored to using these types of units. So we want you to get practice in using these types of units. I just hope they handle it well.
I hope they handle it well. I hope there is a detachment in there that is like uniquely Emperor's Children. I think I said in the Discord, I just want Honor the Prince. I want that back so bad.
Yeah,
that was such a good stratagem. It was so useful. And
it was.
So
Give us they probably will bring it back, but it'll be slightly different. But it was really good. Just turning one of those D6s into a straight 6, guarantee one charge that you really, really need. Now, I mean, I know there's ways to obnoxiously abuse that, but still, if you need something to happen and you got it, it's there.
Yeah, but what is more Emperor's Children than obnoxious abuse?
Exactly. They're all about obnoxious abuse.
But having that minimum 7-inch charge is huge. It makes it so that what is normally likely is unfailable, and it makes it so that you're like, okay, these guys want to be in a fight, they want to be in a scrap, and they're gonna get there, and you can't stop them. Like there's no,
Right.
I think even what in ninth Custodes had Tanglefoot. And I remember, like, Honor of the Prince
That
would
was
almost
such
make Tanglefoot useless because they'd be like, "Oh, well, minus
Yeah.
4 to your charge." And I was like, "Well, I rolled an 11
Well,
inch charge."
Tanglefoot used to be one of the most abusive stratagems for the longest time because it was 1 CP. And even at 2 CP when they changed it, it was still abusive. And then, yes, you have abilities like that. Just go, no, I don't care. And you know what? I agree. It makes sense for the Emperor's Children to have those guarantees because they are precision.
Mm.
That's exactly what they're all about. The perfection of combat. I know exactly what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna kill you, where I'm gonna kill you, and what angle I'm gonna take. So that makes a lot of sense for them. I think the only thing they would need to do with that stratagem is like it was in 9th edition, where it was just across the board for most units, restricted to a couple of units.
I don't know. Being able to fling Terminators across the board is amazing.
One of those Terminators is one of the units I would suggest
okay.
do it with. Like, I think the only ones I would not do that with would be like Possessed, or I think the ones that should have access to it would be Raptors, Warp Talons, Terminators, all your Deep Striker units, and maybe Legionaries. But everything else, they already got a bunch of extra stuff on them, so I don't think they'd need that too much. I think that's pretty fair because that makes Legionaries viable.
Limit it to like infantry, because I mean the other thing is you used to be able to use it to like fling Hellbrutes at people, which was another.
That's awful. That's just
because like Hellbrutes, their whole thing is they're slow, and then you're just like, actually, this guy's gonna like
just run. Just imagine this like big like thing just like hoofing it across the battlefield. It's funny, but it's terrifying at the same time. Yeah, 3 guardsmen are laughing. One guy's like, "Why the fuck are you laughing? Run!"
Why is he faster than me?
Look, he looks like an egg with legs. Yeah, and the egg's gonna smash the crap out of you. Move it.
It's like, I don't need to run faster than him. I need to run faster than you.
Exactly, and I got a head start. Even the commissar is running. No,
it's actually Caiaphas Cain.
Yes, it would be Caiaphas Cain, definitely.
Running faster than everyone.
I agree with that. Restricting it to infantry would make a lot more sense because they're the ones that are going to benefit the most from it. Vehicles should not have access to that, nor the demon engines. Honestly, I really don't think Possessed should either because they're already just disgustingly fast as it is.
Yeah, and one of the things another stratagem I'd love to see them bring back, Murderous Perfection was what it was called, and it allowed you to change any roll to a 6. So you used to use them with las cannons. So say you have a squad of Havocs and you're like, oh, I got this through. Oh, you didn't save? Oh, I rolled a 1 for damage? No, it's a 6.
I took a squad of Chaos Havocs for the Iron Warriors and gave them Mark of Slaanesh, and I specifically used that stratagem a couple times to pick off a tank that I really needed to take out. It's like, no, that thing's going down. And it worked. It was good. You still had to
once you got it, because you picked it after you rolled the damage. So after it had been decided whether or not it was going through.
Yeah.
So like it was like, okay, it's gotten through your save. I am doing damage to you. Oh, I rolled a 2? No, 6.
No.
Like it was a perfect, and you had to declare it before, so sometimes you didn't really use it.
Exactly. And there's another thing, like we as Chaos Marine players, we got our codex out of line with the schedule, so we were supposed to actually be released in 8th edition and have more stratagems at our disposal. We were released in 9th edition, so we had some of these powerful abilities and powerful stratagems with less CP than most other players, and we were still like dunking on some people because those are powerful abilities.
Well, and I think Emperor's Children especially, but CSM in general, they are the more glass cannon-y.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
They're meant to be more fragile, and by that very nature, one of the things we talked about with Tanya a lot was the risk and reward, and that's kind of what makes Warhammer work, is when there's a good balance of risk and reward. And CSM is one of those factions that should feel very risk and reward, because it's very much like, if I pull this off, I'm going to do a lot of damage, or I'm going to put myself ahead. And if this goes wrong at all, I am screwed. And I'm going to figure out my next big gambit.
It makes sense based off of how they are. Like when you compare, like I used to get mad when they were so different from the Space Marines, but You look at the assets the Space Marines have. Chaos Space Marines are in the warp trying to survive, fighting the Imperium and each other, raiding and just getting supplies as they go. So it makes sense that, yeah, they're a glass cannon. They got really powerful stuff, but they can't survive like regular Marines can. So that
Yeah.
feels very lore driven, and I love that about them. And that's how I've usually played my games too. I would make one super combo, and if my combo failed, I'm fighting a losing battle, but I'm still fighting.
Well, I even think of like obliterators, like the Space Marine equivalents to that amount of firepower are like tanks that are 4 times tougher, have much
Yup.
better range. But again,
Yup.
obliterators are like all right, I'm gonna just dump these 2 units out of the warp at you, and they're gonna unleash on you, and then they're probably gonna die.
But I'm going to annihilate something if I roll really, really well. It's my
Yeah.
guarantee. Yeah, I love that. Like Space Marines generally didn't have to sacrifice a lot of units. We had to sacrifice units to make devastating wounds against our enemy.
Mm.
I love that.
And I think that's what I'm hoping the CSM Codex broadly brings that back. I think they've said that there's a cultist specific detachment. There's a Alpha Legion E1, a Night Lord Z1,
Mm-hmm.
and
I love that.
Like an Iron Warrior Z1, and then I think just a general like kind of your Black Legion equivalent. I think is what is going to be in there.
Well, they may I've heard some rumors that they may even bring back some of the what are they called, the renegade chapters, where it's like instead of being like the long war veterans, it's recent chapters of the Imperium's 41st millennia and 42nd millennia who have recently turned to chaos. And there's a couple, like I think the ones that should come back. I really want to see Bile's creations come back. I want to see the Red Corsairs, and from the other ones that are very obscure, I would love to see the Purged, the Brazen Beasts, and there's a Slaanesh one. I think they're called the Sanctified. Oh no, the Scourge, where they're cursed with hearing all of the lies that are in people's heads, and they go mad because of it.
Ooh.
Yeah,
I can see
really
Bile getting
cool
wrapped
ones
into the Emperor's Children Codex, though. I have a feeling you're not going to see him in the CSM one. I have a feeling he's going to get wrapped up into Emperor's Children.
More than likely will. He'll probably rejoin the. Sorry, cat was jumping. He'll probably rejoin the Legion as a weird kind of apothecary and bring his kind of flavor to it. Like they'll bring them back all together as one. Actually, speaking of that, there is one sub-faction of Emperor's Children that I think you would like, Laura, who I'd love to see come back into the into the universe. They were called the Cannibal Corpse Brethren.
Okay.
They were a chapter of loyalist Space Marines who went into the warp to hunt down the traitors during the first the Cursed Founding. When they went in, they landed on a planet that was really like kind of wet and gross, and they started to fight Noise Marines as they were pouring out of the center of the planet. What turned out being was the planet wasn't actually a planet. It was a large, gigantic, skinless humanoid body that opened up, grabbed the Marines, and pulled them in towards its body as well with the rest of the Noise Marines. And upon it pulling them in, they changed and they exited as the Cannibal Corpse Brethren, who are literally, well, they are cannibals. They follow Slaanesh. They're an Emperor's Children sub-faction. I think their armor is like majority pink and purple with smears of blood all over it, and they like really go for the whole cannibal aspect.
And you think I would want to be a cannibal? No, this is not.
I just think I'm just saying. No. I'm just saying the paint scheme is beautiful. It is. I'm all about paint schemes.
That's fair.
Lore is neat, but paint scheme, they are stunning, absolutely stunning army.
See, in my mind, I've always envisioned my Emperor's Children as like almost like very recently fallen Emperor's Children. Like when they went into the warp, like very little time has passed for them, so they're still somewhat upholding. Yeah, like kind of my base color scheme in a lot of my units is still like the purple and the white and the gold. And then it's like graffitied on top of that, so it's very much like they are like recently fallen. Like they're not the black and pink, they're not like more modern Emperor's Children. Like they are old school Emperor's Children that like are just like graffitied and, you know, done up, and they just throw random paint swatches at their like armor because they're just like trying to feel something.
Yeah, and you know what? There's another one there's a faction that's just like those two in an audiobook. They call themselves the Flawless. And they still wear purple armor with gold, but some of it's chased with silver. And they also some of them adorn their sections with heliotrope purple. So it's like a pinky purple, but majority of them still wear the purple of the Legion. And there's one guy named Vidar who was a member of the Legion. He even says in one moment that, unlike some, I tried to still uphold the traditions of our Legion, unlike some of our more depraved brothers. So there's, I like that. The idea that there's still Emperor's Children there, like, no, we're still holding on to our values and trying to keep to the tenets of the Legion the way they used to be. I love that.
Yeah, it's like kind of that, like, they're trying to hold on, but they're not succeeding. That's kind of like my vision for the army.
Exactly.
It's like, you know, they've descended to chaos, but they're still aware enough to know like who they are and what they stand for. Like they're not like complete, like they're not like cannibal. They're not like, you know, they're not completely debauched. They're like, they
just
still
a little
see
bit
themselves as like Astartes, and they're still trying to hold on, but like
yes,
they're also like are also just trying to like connect with any source of feeling to try and hold on to it more.
Exactly. Vidar was the same way. He still wore the similar armor, except for one arm was like wrapped in leather. He still uphold the same traditions, but he still was a little tainted. He actually had a cleft lip from his bottom lip down to his neck that looked like a scar, but it actually opened up to a large mouth that was his doom siren. Kind of like, have you ever seen Blade 2? The Reapers, where they're like, that's literally what it would do. And he would even describe how he would have to wipe away the acidic ichor that was there, and he hated it because it was burning his chin. It was actually scarring him up, and he was looking more like gross looking, and he's actually irritated by it. He doesn't like it.
So yeah, I guess to come back to like when there is an Emperor's Children Codex, I think that's where you're going to see Creations of Bile.
Yeah, it will be.
Is in that codex. Because I have a feeling like, well, actually, you know what though? They said they were only pulling out Lucius and Noise Marines for the index, so maybe they are keeping Bile as just a generic CSM.
That would be cool. I mean, it would make sense, and and to be honest, GW would be foolish to remove that as a faction because the Creations of Bile did so well. Like, Nurgle Snurgle has plans to create her own Daughters of Bile version, which is going to be really cool. I want to create like a little unit, at least for my Emperor's Children, that are the Creations of Bile. Like, the whole idea of it was really, really, really well done. And if you listen to the books, the Primogenitor or the Bile books, all 3 series, you kind of get the idea that, he could definitely have his own army. Easily. Very, very easily.
Well, and you know what? I want to kind of sit on Fabius Bile for a second. But change the subject, because I think Fabius Bile is also a good example of a way to get us to the next topic, which is I just want to talk a little bit about this whole like female custodes controversy.
Yes, the female custodes, the information that came out a while ago.
Yeah, which should not be a controversy at all, but here we are.
We got to talk about it. That's the one thing that we all should probably do a lot more instead of getting upset, is actually talk about it. Discuss it. That's how you find common ground.
No, and you know what? I knew we were building a good community when that news came out and everyone was excited. You know, the Discord lit up as like, this is awesome. I'm more interested in Custodes now because of this. Like, that's the direction it went into, and I was very proud of that. Shout out to the Chaos Divided crew.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is like, that is a good response. Like, you know, if you're indifferent about this, like, that's also fine. Like, you don't have to love every faction, you don't have to care about everything, but for the people that this matters to, like, this is a big deal to see yourself kind of represented in a game that you love, and especially Warhammer, where there's so many factions that feel very much, male based. I think it's a very cool announcement. And I think the only real issue is that Games Workshop just kind of like completely half-assed it.
No, I 110% agree with that. That ideology that Games Workshop messed it up, because the way, like, I'm not gonna lie, I have generally stayed out of Warhammer stuff for the past like couple of months because I've been jumping into Dungeons and Dragons, but I still keep up to date with some things. So the information that I do have about this, I personally don't see a problem or an issue with it. I don't like have an issue with the female custodians coming out, nor do I have a problem with like anything of that sort of way. I don't understand why people are getting so upset about it. Like, there's nothing really to get upset about with the fact that there's female custodians in the lore. I'm really excited for the fact that there are people on both sides that are excited about it. There are for the fact that this is coming out. Then there's people on both sides. One side's getting angry, saying that they shouldn't be there because it's ruining the hobby or whatever their opinion is. There are some that are saying, haha, there's finally this in the game. I really think that people just need to realize that no matter what, it's a good thing. Adding new things to the hobby is good, regardless of what side you have. If it's a lore basis, who cares? Lore can change. GW already said years ago that the whole Warhammer universe is subjective when it comes to information and lore because things are being destroyed on a constant basis and things can change. That makes sense. It does make sense. And on the other hand, you should be adding new models and new units and new ideas to the game to make it more expansive. I don't see it as a problem with there being female custodians in the lore. I actually see it as a great thing because now there's these new cool models that we can use for really cool conversions. Like hell, if I want to add some like half female or weird crazy models to my Emperor's Children, or use them as a female change up for another unit, these models could be fantastic for the hobby for conversion purposes. And then those that actually want to play the army, it doesn't matter. It's a hobby. Getting upset about it, about someone's personal views or your own ideals or how you feel about it, guys, everybody from every walk of life out there, everyone that plays the hobby or is into just the lore itself, relax. This is a good thing. The only thing that you really need to be upset about is how GW handled it, because no matter what, however way you feel about it, we might be getting some new models that are going to be cool to the hobby and some new lore that might be really exciting. So give it a chance, regardless on what side you're on. Be upset with how GW handled the situation. Because from what I found out, I thought that all of this was about, there's a new line of custodians coming out. They're all going to be female. There's this whole big thing happening, but that wasn't the case. I found out that this is actually just a small little paragraph in an excerpt stating that there were female custodians, and someone made a comment to GW saying, oh, so there's female custodians? And someone from GW simply made the comment, there's always been female custodians. That is a bad way to handle that kind of question, especially if you know that that type of question and that type of topic could be touchy, which does make sense in the world we live today. The way they probably could have handled it better would have been to add some really cool flavor and lore on top of that to make sense of why that would have popped up. Because yes, they're absolutely 110% could have, should have, and probably are female custodians. When you look at it from a lore perspective, and this is just my own opinion, I think GW should have handled it like this. Yes, there are definitely female custodians, and this is why. In the lore, it is stated that the Emperor was not able to make female Space Marines because of the way that the Space Marines were created. They were young boys taken at adolescence and put through crazy surgeries, and it didn't work because they were taken at that age. However, a Custodes is not the same as a Space Marine. They are different. They are grown in vats. They are grown from the beginning stages of a human into what they are. So the Emperor can control that state through the entire process. It is fully viable that there are female custodians and male custodians because they are completely different in creation. It makes sense. I actually love it. I love the idea that there are female custodians. It's really cool. When it comes to like how I feel about it as the hobby a whole, I don't really care too much because I've taken a very far back step from Warhammer as a whole itself, because the hobby isn't really doing as much as it was for me before. But the whole idea that we're getting some brand new models and there could be a new faction and new people getting into the hobby and a new army, I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that entirely, because any way that we can make the hobby more approachable for anybody out there to get into it and experience it is a good thing.
Well, and I think the unfortunate part about all this is actually like there's a couple things. The actual short story is actually very cool. So like she is described as playing the blood games, which is a thing Custodes do, and she manages to teleport a nuke into the throne room. So she's like she's a very successful Custodes playing the blood games.
Yes,
and that
exactly.
is so it's like she's within 3 paragraphs you actually get a very cool presentation of a Custodes. And shout out to, I think her name's Candace. Like that's a cool intro. And the thing that I think would have changed all of this if the new Custodes model was her.
I think so too. Yeah.
That alone would have because then you're saying, okay, we're actually doing this. We're actually, you're getting a new model.
Exactly.
We're putting our foot down. Here's a new model. She's friggin' cool as hell. And
exactly.
Almost more of a sneaky, stealthy Custodes. It's wicked.
This is all just an argument about a paragraph. That would have solved the problem entirely. Like you said, put your foot down, put a model out, make the line, make it happen, say it's going to happen. But this is just I don't know. People that are getting mad about it, I just find are kind of silly.
Well, and I think the harm for it, and the reason I wanted to talk about it, is if you're somebody who's like, I really like painting miniatures, I've painted a few D&D miniatures, and I see these Games Workshop minis and they're beautiful and I want to paint them and I want to get into this hobby, and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna watch a few videos, and then beside on YouTube, beside every one of them is just like female Custodes, go woke, go broke, Games Workshop is ruining everything with are you going to be like, oh yeah, this is something I want to pursue? Or do you then step back and be like, no thanks?
It's no, I agree. Look, my mother, when I was growing up, used to say a phrase to me, and I carried it a lot into my adulthood, and it was very simple. And it was like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. There's no need to bring, if you're upset and angry and mad about something, I know the internet is a place where people can just dump, but why? What think about what you're getting mad about. Why are you getting so upset? Is it worth it? Is it worth you getting this riled up about something so small that it's making people happy? It's making people more comfortable. It's doing a good thing. If it's bothering you that much, then just walk away.
Well, and if the thing you're mad about is, wow, this is going to make more people share in the thing that I love.
Right?
What? That's a weird response.
That's a very strange response to have. The way I think of it is they're just upset because, and this is from a standpoint of someone who actually was like this a long time ago. This is from me. I used to be, when I first got into Warhammer, got into lore, I was a crazy lore nut. And I did have a point of view a long time ago that no, there should never be female Space Marines. I have changed that view entirely over the past several years of playing this hobby and got into it because I really believe that some of these people out there that are getting this mad are just so hung up on the written lore and the stuff that's set in stone that they're very really getting blinded by this. It's not destroying anything. It's not bothering anybody. It's not hurting anybody. If it's hurting you, then because that's the reason, that's your own personal problem and issue to deal with. Don't let that get in the way of the true ideal of what this is supposed to be. They're inviting more people into the hobby. Yes, obviously GW is doing more things to make money, but at the same time, it has the potential to bring more people into the hobby and, like you said, have an army that represents them.
Well, and I think one of the struggles with the whole lore thing is really that it's almost a fatal misunderstanding of Warhammer. When you see people getting upset about canon with Star Wars or canon with Star Trek, those are very delineated settings where what you see is what you get. Warhammer is unreliable. Warhammer is intentionally, you have an unreliable narrator. Your lore is through the filter of the Imperium.
Yes.
You don't actually know what is true and what is not. So when you have new information, it's not a retcon. It's just new information. You have learned something new. And I think that's what Games Workshop was trying to say of there's always been female custodians, as in this is not a retcon. We're not changing anything. This is just like new information. Do with it as you will.
Exactly.
And I think the struggle with that is that not everyone understands that. But yeah, if you're someone sitting there like, oh, they're ruining the lore is not anything. It's a collection of stories that may or may not be true.
And the weird thing is, I can understand that point of view because, like I said, I did have that thought process a long time ago about female Space Marines. So I can see and I can understand the thought process of where they're coming from. And honestly, anybody out there that's listening that actually does have that feeling towards the female custodians right now, just let it go. It's not worth it. Like, I found myself like gung-ho at one point saying, well, no, the Emperor did this. The Emperor said it wasn't able to be possible. These are reasons why scientifically, blah, 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 blah. It's written lore. It's a game. Yeah. It can change. Just,
well,
if
and
you're
who's
really
to say that the male
that...
Space Marines isn't also propaganda?
Yeah. Everybody, you're getting hung up on a universe that someone wrote down that's completely fantasy. Chill out. Relax. My life became so much less stressful when I stopped treating the lore like it was gospel.
Yeah. So I mean, it's meant to be fun. It's meant to be enjoyable. And when it contradicts, it doesn't matter. When it is wrong, it doesn't matter. And part of that is also that unreliable narrator is to allow you to fit your own stories into it. You know, we were talking earlier about like my vision for my Emperor's Children. You're talking about Kaylee's, Daughters of Bile. You need to have that gray area. You need to have this unreliableness that, you know what, if somebody had already converted a fully female custodian army, that was in the lore, and now it's confirmed.
Yes.
I mean, but it wasn't not in the lore before.
I'm going to go even way further back with the GW and the 2 missing Primarchs. They specifically did that originally in the game, and they said, we did this so that you can create your own Space Marine legions, your own thing. And there are people out there that have said there could be a female Primarch. There could be an entire female army of Space Marines that maybe something happened to them, they were erased. I am down for that. That's cool. That's really
see any of the paintings
cool.
of Fulgrim. Fulgrim has more is a very feminine looking man, if we're being completely honest.
Oh, absolutely, 110%.
So I mean,
any of those things are absolutely viable. They're all viable, and like you said, it just means that you're getting new information. Like, I don't know how many times in the lore of Warhammer 40k that I thought something was set in stone and then it's changed. And yet there's connections that GW does make to lore and information way back when they first created the game. So they do connect the dots. You just got to do the research.
Well, I mean, we've even talked about it, like, the change from Fail-Badon to, like, Success-Badon is... Like,
that was amazing.
But that's not a retcon. That was just additional information. The story progressed, the story evolved, and we went, oh, this actually all makes sense now. And that's part of the fun of Warhammer, is that you don't ever truly know. Like, early on, we didn't know a lot about the Horus Heresy because it was so elusive, and it was like, oh, it's speculative. And then as we've gotten these books, but those books are also written from the perspective of the Imperium. They're like recollections that the Mechanicum have put together and the Administratum have put together as propaganda.
Way back in the very beginning of like the first edition of Warhammer 40k, there was a book written that even stated what Abaddon's actual goals were. That got swept away for a while to the newer codexes where it just looked like Abaddon was failing. That's where he got the name Fail-Badon. That's where everyone made fun of him. And then they had the Worldwide Crusade, where it was the 13th Black Crusade, Chaos versus everybody else. And you know what? Chaos did win. We actually did beat people. I remember going to the store and beating people and logging in my wins. But because GW didn't want the narrative to go that way, they made it so that Abaddon still failed that Black Crusade. And everyone got mad about it being a retcon because it was set right. I still like what someone said online about that. GW actually kind of set the timeline to the way it was supposed to be originally when we actually did make a difference in that lore. But that just goes to show right there, the lore can change. It went from Abaddon failing the Black Crusade to somehow he's actually succeeded the Black Crusade, but he's never done anything. He's lost every crusade. Well, no. If you go back and look at the older book, it states what his actual true intentions were. There was an ongoing war, but there was little battles that he was winning that were mattering to the actual end goal of the process. And I love the quote that Voldemort makes about him, is that when it comes to the warp and how time works, Abaddon has actually done this relatively swiftly in comparison to others.
Well,
Yeah,
and I think,
war can change.
yeah, again, that's just such a beautiful encapsulation. That's one easy way to consume, but there's 1,000 other ones throughout the lore. Like one of the big things coming back, when I got my first Tau Codex, one of the newer ones, like the level of propaganda and mind control that the Tau Empire exerts was far more explicit than it used to be. It was always kind of hinted that they were these like utilitarian, and the ethereals were this force for good. And then when you read the newer stuff, it's far more like, no, they're like brainwashing. Tau are exposed to like constant media that is very much funneled through the ethereals. So again, you have this evolution from like, no, they work together and they like to get along, and the ethereals are just sort of this leader caste, to like, no, they are being actively lied to on a regular basis and are subject to like constant propaganda. And you're like, okay, that makes them a lot more sinister, because the Tau used to kind of be like, maybe they are the nice guys, and you're like, no, they are like overtly evil in a way that didn't used to be explained. And that's not a retcon.
No, it just changes. They're not retcons. You just, like you said, you learn new information.
Yes.
I thought all Chaos Marines were evil. That is not the case. There is an actual couple of the factions of Chaos Space Marines that will actually defend people against the Imperium, because they believe that the Imperium are, well, what they are, and they're actively protecting people against them. There's a Slaanesh following group that they'll land on a planet, they liberate it, they give them like pleasure areas where they can relax and like be pampered. They have grand festivals. They treat the people with respect and care because they want them to enjoy life. They take the aspect of Slaanesh that is like, enjoy everything to its fullest. And when the Imperium comes to stop them, they defend the people. They actually let the people like, get on your ships, get out of here. We will hold them back until you can leave. And if they can't, they will leave and go on their own, but they try to defend the Imperium. Defend the people. That's nuts. But it's not a retcon. That's just some new information that tells you like not all Chaos Space Marines are bad.
Well, I think they're even a faction of the Emperor's Children, which are typically depicted as like very inhuman to the general population. So yeah, I mean, the World Eaters are one example of a faction that have become incredibly more nuanced over time. Like, early lore on the World Eaters is they're just like Khorne Berserkers. They just kill, maim, burn, and that's all they want to do. And I mean, the whole Horus Heresy paints Angron in a completely different light. Like, Angron's a victim of
absolutely
a lot. And
Angron is literally a pure victim in the entire Horus Heresy. He's just like absolute victim.
He's a victim of the Emperor. He's a victim of Lorgar. He's he just like, his whole story is tragic, which then changes, you go from like, oh, these are just like bloodthirsty monsters of Space Marines to like, no, these are, lost souls who are following a father who is like doomed to trauma and despair and tragedy. And it changes the whole World Eaters from like, oh, they're just like mindless slaves to violence to like, no, it's a pure just like fall of, and it's emotionally deep and raw. And again, people will get mad about that because it doesn't offend their personal sensibilities.
Yeah, like I hear stuff like that. I cry during reading these books because the emotion of that hits me so hard, to feel for these warriors in these moments. I know it's all fantasy, but that hits me in a very deep place. It's so emotional.
I remember reading the Horus Heresy when, the World Eaters start putting the nails in.
Yeah.
So they can feel closer to their father, and you're like, you can see the fall that they're going into. They're like lemmings just walking off the cliff, but it's so that they can feel connected to something, because they feel lonely and lost, and they don't understand their father, and they're trying to connect with him in any way that they possibly can. And it's just this whole like trauma bond that then leads them like directly to Khorne. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
110%.
But it's not like, it was with the best of intentions, and it was coming from a place of like care and concern and compassion, which is just like so antithetical to how World Eaters were presented before.
Yep.
So, like,
For me, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so like there's all like you can add a lot of these changes are actually just to add emotional depth. They're to make these characters and these worlds and these factions more interesting, so that when you as somebody who is a fan or a collector or a hobbyist, that you're like, wow, I really loved World Eaters before, but now my heart like weeps for them. I used to just think they were cool, but now I know that they're like,
you feel for them, like what they've had to go through.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me and Angron, the book Betrayer, when he lands on Deshea, his home world that he was taken from, and he is literally in the sea of the bones of all of his fallen brothers and sisters, he is describing it to Lorgar about what they were like fighting with them. He's swinging his blades around, talking about how Asair would use his flensing chains to slash open the flesh of everybody. It was beautiful, and he has emotion. He cries. It describes him taking some of the skulls and making a necklace to wear to keep them with him. For me, it was a very, very warrior-esque, tender, emotional moment for him, and it really humanized Angron. Like, he's sad. He never got to die with the people that he loved and cared about, so now he has to see them. Like, I'm getting emotional right now just thinking about it. He has to stand there in the remains and know that to them, in their minds, he abandoned them, and he didn't. He was stolen away. So to me, that is like, you can hear it in my voice. That is really sad, because he will never ever be able to tell them that.
And if we weren't allowed to change the lore, you'd never have beautiful moments like that.
Exactly.
If it was some immutable fact that couldn't be changed, you could never have those moments.
Yeah, so he would just remain a monster.
Exactly. And if you're somebody who's sitting there and you're like, oh well, because of this and the, like, you have to be able to accept change in order to have all of these beautiful new moments come out.
Right.
For every change you don't love, there's another one that ends up making something you care about that much more beautiful.
Exactly.
And that's what makes Warhammer. That's what makes it different from any other setting, any other world.
Really,
out there is the
different.
Yeah.
There's something
special. There's something special about
Warhammer. There's something really special about Warhammer 40K that speaks to the soul, your deep emotions, your pride, your ideology, even your stance on certain things. But at the end of it, coming back all the way around to the female Custodes, everybody out there, just give it a chance. Something beautiful might come of this. And I think it will.
Well, and even if the beauty is just more people sharing in this thing that is beautiful,
take it as that.
Yeah.
If you have this negative view, put it aside and try to find that silver lining. Try to find that beautiful thing. Try to find that nice thing about it that will take you out of that mindset, because there's nothing worse than being in a mindset that keeps you angry and closed off from potential other people that may change your life and may touch you in a way that may make you feel better or think differently, or you never know. This may bring someone to a table that may end up being your absolute best friend that you've never known, but ends up being someone that you like ride or die with. You never know. So just accept the unknown, accept change, and hope for the best. And if you can do that, everything else that follows afterwards will just be the icing on top of the cake.
One of the things, I think we've talked about it through many episodes, but Warhammer brings people together that would have no reason to be connected.
110%, yes.
You and I wouldn't know each other without Warhammer.
No. There's a lot of people I've met that I wouldn't know.
Exactly. And I've met tons of cool, amazing people because of Warhammer. And, to sit here and think, oh, well, this might bring in people. Like, Yes, it will, and that's good.
That's what we want. You want that. Bring in more people to this hobby. This hobby is meant to be shared. Like the fact, like regardless of anything else, just the idea that more people could be joining the hobby makes me excited.
You literally can't Warhammer alone.
No, you can't. It sucks, guys. Don't. It's awful. It's not great. You sit by yourself, you paint, you mash your models together, make weird laser noises. It's not fun. You need people. I've done this, yes.
Sharing it with other people, and it's the more people that are interested. Who doesn't dream of a world where it's super easy to get a game in and it's super great to just like chat about the lore with someone, or Can you imagine if you were just like went to the grocery store and you ran into someone and they saw your t-shirt and they were just like, oh hey, let's like talk about Warhammer for 10 minutes, and that would brighten your day up.
Exactly. I have walked through downtown with a Warhammer logo of something on me, and it has stopped someone, and we've started a conversation. Same with Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I've met so many really cool people who I feel like I can now like make friendships with because of the fact that this hobby has brought people into it. It has brought people closer, and so many different walks of life that, like you said, you would not expect meeting these people, knowing them, and being their friend, because in your walk of life you would never run into them ever at all, period.
Yeah. No, and I think that's so healthy for you too, because people kind of get stuck in the.
Well, this is just another thing from like my point of view as a person that Warhammer changed greatly. I went through a portion of my life as a young man, not really knowing who I was or who I was supposed to be, trying to copy others when it came to their style, their mannerisms. Just like I didn't know where I fit in. I was trying to be something that I wasn't. It wasn't until I got older and I got into Warhammer and I realized, like, I finally accepted myself for who I was. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I love crazy fantasy stuff. And I'm really down with, like, all of that. And I never accepted that for my entire life. And Warhammer allowed me to break out of that shell, stop trying to be what I wasn't, and accept myself for who I was. And that, yeah, I'm a freaking nerd and I love it. I love Warhammer. It's a great hobby. This is what I do. The old me would have been like, I do this like hobby of paint models, and it's all right. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I got like just stuff's everywhere. It's like it's my thing. I'd be ashamed of it. Ashamed of it now. This hobby's let me grow and to be like, yeah, play Warhammer.
Corn.
Awesome. And that should go for anybody that's in the hobby. Whether you are a painter, whether you're a builder, whether you're a gamer, whether you're a lore buff, or whether you're just a number cruncher in the game, whatever it may be, this hobby should make you excited and help you in some way. Every person I've met, it's helped them in some way. So let it help them.
I can't add anything on to that. That's beautifully said.
Thank you.
Now, we did also want to talk about kind of a continuation conversation you and I had after.
Yes. About the special missions and things.
Special missions. I when we had Tanya on, talking about kind of 10th feeling a little bland, and you and I kind of afterwards were talking about that, and we're like, well, what do some of the older missions look like? And
you whipped out that book and pulled that right out. The one of my favorite missions of all time. You just randomly was like, that's the one I love.
And I think one of the ideas we wanted to put out there is, looking through, and I'm sure you can find old white dwarves, because they used to also be full of narrative missions, and taking them and honestly like looking through. So that was from a 5th edition rulebook, super easy to adapt to 10th, like very little changes necessary, to be completely honest.
Absolutely.
And just makes a whole refreshing change, because I also get, you don't necessarily want to get into like memorizing 7 different editions of Warhammer in order to get games in. And so I think 10th as a rule set, it is not fundamentally flawed.
It's not fundamental. No, 10th as a rule set, it does work. There's some flavor things that are out there, but the missions and the way they're run just don't jive with the way they need to be.
Yeah.
If you take aspects from some of the older codexes, some of the older White Dwarves, hell, even the old rule books from like fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth edition, they all have missions that are written into them that were very narrative driven. Like the one that you posted was about escorting the individual to a drop ship that's getting them off the planet. Another one of my favorites, and this is one I've tried to throw at a lot of people, but they just don't like the idea because, oh, it doesn't sound fair at all. It's like, but it sounds cool. You have your army and I have my army. I deploy my entire army in the middle of the table and I have some barricades and things set up. And you deploy your army around the table on all edges wherever you want. And it's literally survival. It's a last stand. It was actually called Last Stand. We fight. If a single model is still alive in my army by turn 5, I win the game. But if you wipe out every model that I have, you win the game. And it was really cool.
Actually, there's I want to say it's actually in the Wood Elves. What were they called? The fantasy one. It's that setting. Whatever fantasy codexes were called at the time. I can't remember off the top of my head. Army list.
No, they were called. Yeah, they were called. Army books, and they were definitely called the Wood Elves.
Yeah, but the scenario in the back of that one was the same thing. It was a last stand, but the ones in the middle, I believe, they actually had fewer points than the ones that were surrounding them. But the ones that were surrounding them had to put so much in reserve, so they couldn't just in one turn.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. You had to walk on slowly.
Yeah, so these. And it was more of an ambush. But that also creates this whole different scenario. And some of these extra rules around that setting helps balance it out. Because you're right, they're not 100% balanced. The one I posted in the Discord was like you said, you had to get the guy up. But the other side of it is the deployment zone for the opponent was on the side furthest from the shuttle. So you were deployed in the center. Your opponent is deployed on one side of the board, and you have basically a head start on getting this guy to the other side of the table. But he can't advance, so he's literally just like boop, boop, boop. It's going to take you 3 or 4 turns to get him across, and your opponent is rushing you the whole time.
Yep, and you have to withstand that. And then there was other special rules that made it even more difficult for both sides as well.
Yeah, and made it difficult to have monsters and things because it was fought in a vacuum, so wounds could potentially be multiple wounds, and you had low gravity, so infantry could jump over obstacles as if they were jump pack infantry. So there was a lot of cool stuff going on that completely changes your just regular mission. So I do encourage you, and honestly, if you go from 7th edition back. If you find an old codex at a game store or a used bookstore or an old rule book,
grab it.
Those are full of the missions like that, and they are not hard to adapt. Something like this mission had certain attacks under certain circumstances would be considered rending. That's basically a devastating wound in modern terms. So you can still play 10th. You don't have to learn a new edition. You don't have to learn anything new. You can just literally take, the setting and apply it. And, even things like older editions used to have variable amounts of turns. So you could actually roll to see if there was a 6th turn.
I used to love that. It was a way that you could actually kind of end the game relatively early. But if you won that roll, you had one more turn to make up some points and probably beat the guy.
Yeah, so if you were, absolutely gotten put on the back foot in the first couple turns, you couldn't score, but then needed to, make it up in the later half, you might actually have more time to do that. Which then also means your opponent has to account for the fact that you can't just be dead by turn 5, because you might then give an entire extra turn to your opponent to score, and depending on how the mission is scored, it might be entirely at the end.
Yes.
Or it might be largely at the end. It might just be who holds a single objective at the end of the match.
You may have a game where the simple objective is kill my warlord. That's it. just kill the warlord. And that can actually be a lot harder, and especially back in the old edition, it was a lot harder than you think, because warlords could jump from unit to unit to unit to unit to unit. So they always had bodyguards. You had to like dig through the army and either catch them off guard in a point where you were like, I've got you trapped between two buildings, or whittle them down to where it's just the warlord and that's all that's left. Which also created really cool epic games, like just annihilating your enemy as much as possible. That I actually had a lot of fun with those kind of games.
The other thing to look out for, if you can find them, there was basically like expansion packs for early editions. And again, the rules aren't going to work perfectly, but one of the ones that I know was quite popular was Cities of Death.
Yeah,
and it basically added a ton of rules to verticality, so it made more sense to have like multi-leveled buildings on smaller boards, because you were fighting in a city, and it cut down on a lot of like the shooting. It made it harder to just shoot across the board, and it gave you rules so that you could charge like up into buildings and like, you know, almost have kind of like Rat Pack squads that are just like clearing out like room by room.
I saw it played once, and it was fantastic seeing this many buildings like pumped in such a small space. Like, if I could say an equivalent, roughly how many pieces of terrain do we put on a table these days for like 10th edition?
Like maybe 9 or 10.
So yeah, take that 9 or 10, add another 5 on top of that, and crunch that into a, like, what was it, a 4x4 section of the table, and that was like Cities of Death, and it was really cool. Just enough space for tanks to roll through the streets, but enough space that your guys could hide behind walls and ambush tanks or get up to the top of a building, and because they're looking down and firing down, they get a bonus from firing down. It was like an epic city style fight, which made a lot of sense, because in all honesty, a lot of the fights that we have now just feel like it's every single planet is just barren with a couple of ruins on it.
It's true. And, you know, realistically, like, that Cities of Death also, I feel like I've heard it compared a couple times to boarding actions, but boarding actions are 500 points. Cities of Death was still a full 2,000 point game.
Yep. You still had a full army.
Yeah. So you were still playing with your full force. It was still that whole skirmish rather than like a kill team style game that still had all that verticality and had all of kind of, again, it's more rules, but if you're looking for something fresh, which I think, you know, that's what we were talking about, is how do we add some freshness to something that feels very stale?
Yeah, and it's as simple as taking one of these old books, taking the shell of the mission or the rule or whatever it may be, and wrapping it around the nougaty center of 10th edition. And it may seem daunting and hard at first, but just change a couple of things. If something doesn't make any sense, alter a rule to something that makes kind of sense for something in 10th edition.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of all the infantry being able to be in low gravity and having just regular Marines bouncing over rocks and just elbow dropping other armies. It just sounds great.
Well, and, you know, realistically, the difference in that is it'd be similar to giving everything fly.
Yes.
But they don't have the fly keyword, so thus anti-fly doesn't work on them, but they're still able to just like jump up and over buildings and over obstacles, and they're able to move in a way that you're not expecting because it's low gravity. So, you know, again, you can adapt them to 10th edition rules without a ton of work.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, it's similar if you've ever played D&D, like adapting, you know, a campaign from 3rd edition to 5th edition. There's going to be some parts where it doesn't jive perfectly, but it's not actually as daunting, and you only have to deal with the rules as they come up.
Well, I mean, like, even Matt Mercer had to do it for the first season of Critical Role, because he'd even said, we switched over from Pathfinder to 5th edition D&D, and there was a drastic change in the rules, but a lot of the players, after a couple of sessions, got an idea for it, and they realized it wasn't that much different. They just, some phrases changed, a couple abilities changed here and there. Some classes had a little bit of an issue, but there was still they had a lot of great time. That's really all it is. You just have to be willing to adapt and alter some things to make it more fun, because at the end of the day, that's what the hobby's all about. You should be having fun. And for me now, going to a tournament and playing across from somebody where, 3/4 of the game doesn't matter. You just play till the end, score your missions. It feels very similar to a game of solitaire, and then the game is over. And when I say when 3/4 don't matter, I mean rolling to go first and deployment does not really matter at all because both sides are the exact same. Those things to me, they matter. Those little aspects matter to the game. So being able to take that and make it more fun, I'm all for that. This is something that actually may get me back into regularly hitting the table and playing a game of Warhammer with somebody, because I'm not down for the tournament competitive scene anymore. But if we're doing something like this, absolutely, hell yes.
Well, and I want to
praise Slaanesh.
I know. I'm converting you.
Listen, I did that test for what legion you are. It came up Emperor's Children instead of World Eaters. I was devastated, but I understand it. Well, it was good. Like, I answered, like, that's when I realized how close they are together, because the only question I answered that turned me towards the Emperor's Children was, when you are facing your enemy, would you do A, B, C, D? A was annihilate your enemy completely with a frontal charge, or destroy 50% of your enemy's forces and then issue a challenge to them one-on-one. And for me, that's what I would do. Immediately, I was like, I would do that. That's like, I would challenge someone to one-on-one combat to, like, just be like, there needs to be no more blood spilt on the battlefield when we both have soldiers that can continue to fight. So why don't you and I finish this one-on-one? And that's exactly what I would do. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm really an Emperor's Children at heart.
You're secretly Lucius.
I know.
Yeah, when I did that, I got Sons of Horus, so I felt a little weird about that one. So,
right. It just kind of goes to show a little bit, like, really how you are. Like, I'm a world eater at heart, but deep down there's a little bit of Slaanesh, and they'd be like, yes.
It's true. I think, yeah, no one is 100% any one legion, because you...
Oh, no. Like, even I prefer the world eaters that are more martially prowess than the ones that are psychotic. So that kind of does speak to, I do run the line of half and half Khorne and Slaanesh.
Because I don't like the Emperor's Children that are, like, completely gone. I want some that are, I like it when they're, still striving for perfection.
Exactly. I even uphold the tenets of Khorne that are on the good side of his coin rather than the bad side. The bad side, mania, rage, murder, bloodshed, slaughter. But the good side of Khorne is martial prowess, honor, survival of the fittest, truth, not lying, strength above all. Those are the values that I lean more towards when I think of Khorne, and those also could be portrayed as Slaanesh as well, especially martial prowess and honor.
I mean, Slaanesh is actually the god of love, so that gets into a whole other, like,
a whole another level.
A whole other level. But yeah, I just wanted to say, truth, justice, and the Khorne way. Is that, are you saying that you're like the 40k Superman?
Kind of. More like, well, not really. It's just like, I like the aspect that there's one of the books where Sanguinius is having a conversation with Ka'Bandar, who is a bloodthirster of Khorne, and he tells him that Horus has turned traitor. You have no idea what's going on, and he calls Ka'Bandar a liar. And Ka'Bandar gets really upset about this. He goes, "No, little angel, I would not lie to you. Khorne does not lie. I speak the truth." That's what I like about Khorne. Khorne is not there to deceive you. He is not going to lie. He will tell you the truth, and he will come at you face to face, head on. I like that. I'm not one to be sneaky or conniving or stab someone in the back. I'm the kind of person that says, I don't like you. I'm going to come hit you in the face. I'm letting you know, I'm going to do that because I want you to know that it's coming.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before we wrap this one up?
You know what? I think people are going to have a lot of fun playing the hobby with some new missions. I'm relatively, I won't say I'm crazily excited for female custodies, but I'm excited to see what happens and how things develop. And I cannot wait for Emperor's Children. I'm very excited for the future of Warhammer with this potential of the female custodies and the potential of seeing Emperor's Children, and hopefully the potential of people out there taking old missions, remaking them, and having some really, really amazing fun. I'm very excited for all that.
Here, actually, I do have one last question for you. If we organized a Chaos Divided narrative RTT using some of these old missions and as kind of our basis, would we get you out for a an event.
I would, if it was that case, I would definitely do that. I would, playing a narrative RT, I would 100% go for that, because in my mind, it evens the playing field for every single person in the game. You're no longer having someone that's going to be hardcore, mega rules, wounding on twos, hitting on twos. I have absolute certainty, versus someone that may not be as adept at the game. Evens the playing field. I've always liked that. Even with some of the randomization of the old past games, I like it when the playing field is even, because it's not supposed to be, it's never going to be ever balanced. But allowing a little bit of a shift where there's a small chance that even though this person isn't as good as the other person, they could still win the game on a couple of dice rolls. I love that. So if there was a type of RT that we did where it was narrative driven, I would 100% be down for that.
I'm almost, from what you're saying, it's the even but not necessarily balanced. It's like you both have the chance to win,
but
it's
idea.
Not perfectly, I like that idea.
Yeah, everyone, you have a chance of success, but it's not like, I don't like the idea of this is a guaranteed win. If I walk up to a table and I look at your arm and go, oh, I'm going to win no matter what, I know exactly what's going to happen. I like the uncertainty of the tides could turn in your favor if there's a narrative driven thing where, like you said, the low gravity, the being within a vacuum, escorting somebody off the table, being the last man standing, having my warlord survive, things like that. Like, you may be a brand new player of Warhammer 40k, only had 2 games ever. You play against someone who's been playing tournaments for years, and just because you were able to hide your warlord and keep him alive, you won the game. That can be huge for somebody. Like, pride wise, just like feeling really good about themselves. Like, I was able to beat someone that is way above my skill level, and I did it. That can be a huge moment for somebody and drive them further in the hobby. So I am all for that 100%.
Awesome. Maybe we'll figure it out. In the meantime, I want to thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to Chaos Divided wherever you're listening from. And you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Chaos Divided 40k. If you're a fan of what we're doing and want to join our growing Wholesome Hammer community, you can find us at patreon.com/Chaos Divided 40k. Support the show, join the Discord, participate in the conversations. It's a good time. And if you'd like to connect with us directly, we're at Team Blood God, at Blushing Noise Marine, and spread some love like the sickness with at Nurgle_Snurgle. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody, and hit the jazz music.
Hit that jazz music.
Hit the jazz.